All right, we are live. Welcome everyone for a nice BTS behind the scenes look at the judges process for the GTM Leadership Awards. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We've got some fun slides, lots of conversation. All right, let's get into it. GTM Leadership Awards, what are those? The GTM Leadership Awards is an award program sponsored by wonderful sponsors you see at the bottom of the screen here, but it's all about identifying the leaders in operations in GTM. So across marketing, sales, customer success, the leaders who are really, really building the future for what it means to be a GTM ops leader and sort of setting the tone. So with that, we put together a wonderful panel of judges that you can see here. I'm Em Wingrove. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Aptitude 8. Let's see, I've been in marketing for like 12 years and built a business in the process. I wanted to be a part of this because I want to find the best and the brightest, and I want to recognize them. There hasn't really been a program like this in the past, so I'm excited to be a part of it. And with that, Matt, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, Matt Baum, CEO and founder of RevOps Co-op. We have a global community of now 18,000 plus folks from kind of all over the place. Started the community about 5+ years ago and have seen the evolution of revenue operations happen over those 5 years. And the thing that had me most excited about participating in this is that revenue operators are kind of like, they're like your, actually I had to replace my hot water heater like a couple months ago. And they're kind of like, in terms of appliances, they're like a hot water heater, super important, super critical, right? You need them literally every day, but you typically only notice them once something breaks or goes south. And I love the fact that we are putting a spotlight on the people who are there behind the scenes, making sure the trains are running on time, on schedule, and doing all the things to drive the best revenue outcomes that typically don't get a whole lot of the spotlight, like sales leaders, marketing leaders, other folks would. So that's the thing that had me most excited to participate.
Thanks. Ryan? Uh-oh, you're on mute.
Sure am. You would think 5 years since COVID started, we'd have that figured out, but still do it. I'm Ryan Gunn, founder of Attribution Academy. We make online courses to teach marketers how to prove their impact on revenue in HubSpot. And I've been leading marketing teams for roughly 10 years. I've always kind of gravitated more towards the operational side of things. And a few years ago, I started just sharing simple tips on ops in HubSpot on LinkedIn that eventually evolved into teaching ops skills full time. So a lot of love in my heart for the ops people. And just to kind of echo what Matt said, I wanted to do this because ops pros spend a lot of the times doing stuff that is behind the scenes. We don't get credit when the big deals close. And like he said, we only get noticed when something breaks. So I wanted to help shine a positive light on the hard workers that make good market teams run.
Thanks, Gunn. How about Kim?
Hey, I'm Kim Hacker. I'm the COO at Arrows. At Arrows, we work with customer success and sales teams, build collaborative spaces to collaborate with buyers and customers. And my career has been in sales, marketing, customer success, onboarding. So lots of the customer facing or the kind of teams that are getting the recognition for a lot of their work. And for the last 4.5 years, I've been more or had more attention toward the ops side of things. We also work with a lot of operators. So our tool is for customer success and sales teams, but a lot of times we have someone from RevOps or ops in some capacity working with us to kind of set up the systems to enable the sales and customer success teams to work. So we have a lot of love for the operators who are setting things up, working with us to kind of get that stuff set up so that the champion or the person who is actually using our tool can work. And I think I have a little bit more of an understanding of that because I've been kind of the operator on the Arrow side of things too. And I think to what everyone's saying, it's easy to go unrecognized, or kind of like to know internally, like I was a part of that big win that we just had. But I think being able to share the wins, being able to have people actually nominate operators and say, hey, like I recognize the work that you're doing and this is awesome, was awesome.
Thanks, Kim. And on a little bit of a more sad note, I'm sorry to report that Sangram couldn't join us today. He's got a bit of a bug, a bit of a flu that's going around. You can kind of hear it. I'm just recovering myself. So we hope that he feels better, and we'll have to pick on him later about, why he wanted to be in the program and some of his standout nominations that he judged. All right, y'all. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Wouldn't be right if I didn't give a quick nod to all of the top 40 GTM Leadership Award winners for 2025. And I put the year in there, by the way, because we totally plan to do this again next year, because my hope is that this community just continues to grow, right? And I want this to be harder and harder and harder for judges to pick in future years. But big shout out to the winners. Also, big shout out to the sponsors. Thank you guys for helping to make all of this possible. It's great to have big brands that certainly know the space behind such a important award program. So thank you. All right, what are we going to talk about today? Key trends. There were so many commonalities among the winners, and we need to break those down, because if there are commonalities among the winners, then it means we probably need to tell our audience about them so that others can start to pick up on those key hacks and tips and tricks. Each of the judges, we actually picked a standout nomination. So we're going to highlight the one that we felt was very, very powerful. And then we'll sort of zoom out a little bit, have a nice sort of GTM discussion, roundtable discussion with the judges. We'll reflect on sort of the whole program. And then we've got some fun updates to share towards the end of this digital event. So with that, let's get into the trends. I'm a data girly, and nothing is more powerful than when data sends you down a certain path, right, into a certain direction. And so these trends mean something. So let's get into them. The first one being HubSpot was all over these nominations. And it wasn't just HubSpot as a marketing automation platform. As you know, in the beginnings of HubSpot, that's what it was, but it's not that anymore, right? We saw in nominations it being referred to as the GTM Command Center. So that was exciting to see. Gunn, I'm going to pick on you here a little bit, because I know you've got so much experience with HubSpot, not just using it, but building on it and integrating it. Tell me a little bit about why you think it has sort of evolved from just marketing into so much more.
Yeah, the big changes, I think, have taken place in really the last few years. Before that, I think a lot of people thought of it as just a marketing tool. But now, all the time we see sales teams operating in it, CS teams, even like back office operations, all being run out of HubSpot. And I think part of the reason we're seeing that focus reflected in a lot of these nominations is, with more teams working in it, the operational complexity increases. So you need a strong operator who's going to be able to keep all of that stuff running and working together.
Now, Matt, you have access to a very, very large community of RevOps and ops professionals. Are you seeing the same thing with sort of HubSpot adoption and usage?
Yeah, there's been a lot more chatter on, I'll say, all things HubSpot throughout the community, and especially at some larger mid-market enterprise sort of companies. Where, yeah, like I said, 5+ years of running the community, back when we first started things, a lot of focus was on Salesforce, for example, and there's still plenty of that goes on, but everything HubSpot has been a lot more popular from a lot of different types of companies most recently.
Yeah, the popularity thing certainly shines through. And I feel like a big part of that is the user friendliness. It's just good to look at, and it's fun to use. It's intuitive. And Kim, your company Arrows actually builds onto HubSpot. So I'm sure you have some thoughts on, where it's gone in the market in the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. We basically decided to go all in on HubSpot maybe around 3.5, 4 years ago. And at the time, it was not an immediate like, oh yes, we want to run everything from the CRM. And I think what we have really seen is like we have people coming in saying we want HubSpot as our source of truth, or we want our CRM as the place where all of the data is kind of stored and connected together. And so it really matters to have our tools and our stack connected to this place where we're housing all of our marketing data, all of our sales data, all of our customer success data kind of in one place, whether you're using it to actually run, like, for example, we'll get into like, if you're using CS platforms, like maybe you're not running customer success from HubSpot, which is now available. But if you have a tool that can actually connect and integrate into it, then that allows you to at least have the data connected and kind of have be able to speak back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the command center. We saw so much just the word integration or integrating with or connecting or unifying was a big keyword among all of the nominations. And yeah, it's great to see, people were talking about building custom coded actions in HubSpot. It was not possible at all, even as recently as like 2 years ago, Gun, keep me honest here. But yeah, just seeing that, I used to use in the past, like a full dedicated ABM tool, like a point solution for it. It can be done in HubSpot now. And that connects both marketing and sales in that way. So love to see it. Any final thoughts on the sort of HubSpot trend? All right.
I'll just add that you mentioned the ease of getting started with it. We use HubSpot for everything within RevOps Co-op, and it was for that exact reason. Just super easy to get in, start to build things, do things, and then you just add on from there. I think that makes it another reason why it makes it super popular for operators.
Yeah, and we'll get into that too, right? Adoption is a big piece, and enablement that we saw among the nominations. So we'll get into some of that as well. Let's keep it moving. Leadership, enablement, and cross-functional impact. When I think of RevOps, I always think of people, process, and tools in that order, because in my opinion, the people is the hardest part, right? Like if you're smart and you know systems, implementing a tool or integrating a tool with something else or trying to build some architecture, I'm not going to say that it's easy, but nothing is more difficult than trying to inspire, motivate, build consensus, get buy-in, get approval, get budget, get all teams sort of together and on the same page and aligned into your vision. That is so incredibly difficult. And to see this as one of the top trends, it warmed my heart, because it's sort of validating to me that, okay, yeah, the leaders that are winners aren't just executing, they're also building and connecting people. What did you guys see?
Yeah, I think that was such a big piece of it, because like you said, you can be an operator and you can set up systems and you can do all of that back end work. But if you can't convince people that it's worth doing, if you can't convince people, and honestly, like if you can't, I think there's such a big part of it that goes into the leadership of saying like, hey, I'm here to help you and I want to help you hit your goals. And so kind of developing that even before you get to any kind of results and get to any kind of like, oh, we can nominate someone for this award. It's like you need that buy-in and that kind of relationship building to say, I'm a person you can trust. Let's work together on this and kind of be collaborative. So I think that is like such a huge foundation that is oftentimes not noticed as much, I guess, or like you don't pay as much attention to it because you're so much thinking about the systems. But that is really what it takes to be like a standout and get those results with your teams, is being able to collaborate, understand what they need, and be able to be trusted by them.
Trust is a big word. And it comes back to not just the data and not just the tools, but the people that are leading, right? Is that something that you come across much, Matt, like in the community, getting people to actually buy in and, build consensus around something before they're even able to execute?
Yeah, so especially within revenue operations, if you think of going across marketing, sales, customer success, you're going to have different leaders on those teams. You're going to have dotted lines, you're going to have solid lines, things that you own, things that you don't own. Like nothing's going to be clean, right? It's going to be messy. And so, you can go in and, try to, I'll say like fight or, like get access to the things that you want, or you can go in and try to influence the people, the teams to be able to accomplish the outcomes. And I think the best operators are able to influence different stakeholders, different leaders, different functional heads, regardless of, say, the organizational directive that they might have in order to get those things done that they need to get done. So yeah, that's a critical skill that every operator needs to have. You can't exist just within your lane, if you will, because again, revenue operations, you need to span the entire engine, and you need to drive influence in order to deliver those revenue outcomes that every business ultimately needs and wants you there for.
And I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when it comes to like some big motion or rollout, I'd like to say that I don't have ego, but I am a human and I have some, and I want to be visible. Like I want to get credit, and the leaders were giving credit where it was due, and up-leveling, upskilling those around them. That takes time. You have to care. You have to want that, not just for the whole motion, but for the individual that you're trying to motivate or inspire or upskill. And so it's just wonderful to see, because like I said, as much as I'd like to say I don't have any ego, I do. And these leaders seem to not, right? They seem not to have ego driving their big decisions. They care about the bigger picture. And to see them zooming out was inspiring for me, especially because I got some ego. Alrighty. Oh, one other thing I wanted to call out here, because it was just too cute. One of the winners, I think his name's Doug Taylor. In his nomination, someone else who nominated him said that he's always giving tips and tricks, and they call them Doug's Nugs, like nuggets of information. I could not. So that I was going to give him the vote anyways, but that certainly added some extra points for me. I don't know if you guys.
That's adorable.
All right. We also saw a ton of data-driven everything and measurable impact. So for you guys, I don't know, when I went through the judging process and went through all the different nominations, because there were a lot and it was really hard to pick. One of the sort of criteria or factors that was helping me prioritize was, are there percentages or numbers? Like, is there something that's measurable here? Because I mean, if it's not measurable, then for me, I'm like, is it real? Data is everything. So that was something really, really impactful to see. I don't know if that weighed you guys' decisions as well.
Yeah, 100%. That was like my biggest thing. I did the same thing of like, my like first skim was like, okay, let me see who's showing measurable results. I think it's tough because sometimes it takes a while to get those results, but it's like, that is what I want to see. That's what these awards are about, is like, you can set up the best systems, but if you can't show how that contributes to revenue or efficiency or whatever that ends up being, then it's maybe just not there yet. And you can still prove that out over time. But there were so many good nominations that had those results. So we know it's possible and we know people can show them. And I think it's even cooler. We had a lot of like people who, self-nominations or nominations from other people, but having so many nominations come in where other people knew the results that they contributed to was really awesome too. So they're doing a great job of like internal advocacy, I would say, for themselves, which is awesome and I think is needed.
I had the same experience. And one of the things that struck me is that it wasn't just the metrics that I expected. You think about GTM ops, of course, you're thinking about revenue increases, efficiency gains, maybe error reductions, but there were metrics around like what I would almost consider soft benefits, like trust and motivation, that had clearly come from like internal employee surveys. And I thought that was really powerful, that it's not just, how are we making the numbers go up and to the right? It's how are we actually impacting our own team and like the human beings on our team in a positive way?
Yeah.
And the only thing I'll add to that is, I think as operators, a lot of times, right, we're in the weeds, we're in the details. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. So I don't need you when you're measuring the results or the impact you have. I don't need you to go out to like the 13th decimal point and have like some, like statistically like precise way of measuring things. Like, be directionally correct. And then the point that Kim hit on, say it out loud, share the results. And that can mean like, you might get feedback or like, hey, I don't think that's the way to measure this. Maybe we should be doing things this way. But if you don't tell the story, if you don't say it out loud, then no one's going to be able to give you feedback. No one's going to know the results you're actually able to deliver for them.
Yeah, it requires some forethought. I don't know about you guys. I've built a lot of stuff, and thinking about how I want to report the efficacy of the solution that I've built is the last thing, if I even think about it at all. So I think that just demonstrates that these leaders, these winners, are cut above the rest, and it's why I'm not a winner. Because they're thinking about that right before it even happens. Because a lot of the builds, you do need to think about how you'd like to report on the actual success of the solution that you've implemented far before you've even started building things, because it could inform, what properties or objects or different schemas that you're using. So we love data. We love that these winners are, data driven. It's kind of, I feel like, required in a way. So not terribly surprising to see that as a trend. All right, I'm moving on to AI. What would these winners be without AI, right? I don't think I've gone anywhere to any conference or any sort of business gathering without this coming up. But what stood out from these winners is there was no buzzword about it, right? They were actually implementing AI solutions, and again, that they could measure, and they're fully embedded into the solution that they've built out. And I thought that is really what we all need to see and hear, because I don't know about you guys, but especially when AI first started coming out, it did just feel kind of like a word or like some quick demo that I can't actually make happen because it's really just a demo that is behind some, paywall or something. So I love to see that they were actually embedded, like really working AI solutions. What about you guys?
That was a really big one for me, because a lot of teams, they say they use AI, but a lot of that usage is just, we will upload a spreadsheet to ChatGPT and have it generate something and then put that back into HubSpot or wherever it needs to be. And so many of the nominations were talking about like deeply integrated solutions. They're leveraging a variety of different tools, but they're doing it in a way that is connected so it can be automated. It removes those manual steps that I think a lot of companies are still having to do with AI. So that was really impressive.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to actually the last point too, is like I think so much of the buzz around AI is, and I do it too, but it's like talking about like, oh, this is what's possible, this is what you could use it for. But it's like, it's actually, people are implementing it. And the nominations that we saw are people implementing it to come back to the measurable impact that they are trying to have, right? So they're not just implementing AI to implement it. They're saying, hey, here's a goal that we have for this team or for this specific problem that we have. And AI is one of the things that we are going to implement in order to solve that. So I think that's where it really comes back to, is like, what is the thing that you're trying to do? Great. If you can improve that or make it better with AI, then that's awesome. But just adding it to say that you use AI is doesn't mean anything.
The daily briefing engine, and that it was very well detailed in that nomination, was one of the coolest things that I'd seen throughout all of them. Because one, it's real life application of like contextual data. Like they were pulling in data from the call recording technology, I think it was Gong, and from Zoom, and actually using that as a mechanism to enable. I know we just talked about enablement, but to enable their team every single day. Here's what's going on. Here's what already happened. Here's what you should probably do next. That's really using AI in a smart and practical way that other people can do too, by the way. Like, yes, these winners are extremely impressive, but I think you'll see that most of them are very excited to share what they know, and to do so in a way, again, that you can sort of just pick up the pieces and go with them. Anything to add there, Matt?
Just conviction. I think the other thing is just conviction on why they're using AI for things, but also conviction on why they're not applying it to certain areas, right? Always both sides of that is knowing what problems you want to apply to, but also where it doesn't make sense or where not to apply, right? Like AI isn't one of those things that you got to throw at everything just because. And I think the folks that were kind of in the top 40, they knew why they were applying it in certain areas as opposed to others.
I agree with you on that one. All right, let's go through some of our standout nominations. We each were asked to pick one. It was very hard. I'm sure it was for you all too. But they had, unforgettable sort of things about their nomination, and I want to go through each of those. So with that, let's start with Sandy Robinson. Matt, that was your pick.
Yeah, so Sandy's awesome. She's been in the RevOps Co-op community for a while. So I've gotten to know her. She's spoken at our RevOps AF conference as well. We've had her on our RevOps AF podcast. So I've known Sandy for a while, but I think a couple of things that stand out to me about Sandy is, one, she has a whole boatload of experience. So, one, I think I'll say the obvious here. No one goes to college to get a degree in revenue operations, right? So you land in revenue operations based on a certain set of experience that you have. With Sandy, she way back in the day, she was working at a snowboarding shop selling snowboards, and she would go out and then snowboard afterwards. Then she went on to work in sales at Dish Network. Then she went on to work in sales at the Yellow Pages, if anyone here remembers what the Yellow Pages were, right? Selling ads. And then has just worked her way up into directors of sales operations, VPs of revenue operations. And that background and experience, I think, is so critical to her success because she has seen so much. She's naturally curious, and she just really keeps an open mind. She always questions kind of why, right? Whether it's tooling, whether it's process, always starting from square one, never taking anything for granted. And to get at the last thing I'll mention, the whole communicating value piece, she's always able to really communicate strongly, why this is important, the outcomes that her work has produced, or the things that she's done for the team, which is critical for any revenue operations leader. So that's just a little bit about Sandy and some of the stuff that stood out to me about her.
Sounds like we might have to hit Sandy up for course curriculum for how to actually get a degree in RevOps. Love it.
Yeah, she's awesome.
All right, next up we have Chelsea Levitt. That was your pick, Kim.
Yeah, I actually don't know Chelsea. So, hey, Chelsea, if you're here. But this was a nomination that really stood out to me. First of all, love any kind of customer ops or customer success ops. I feel like we always hear about marketing and sales ops. And so this is, or just RevOps generally, but specializing in customer success is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I loved hearing about this. And I think what really stood out to me about Chelsea is, based on the nomination, it sounded like it was kind of a pivotal year for Sprout Social. And there were maybe some leadership changes, and it was an opportunity to really step up and kind of lead a big change that was happening across their CS org. And it was kind of a big fundamental shift that based on what I understood about the nomination, it kind of went and exceeded even just the operational bit and kind of was a larger leadership initiative of hey, here's the direction that I believe we should take this. Here's how it's going to happen, and kind of orchestrating everything underneath that. So it was just really impressive that it was I see an opportunity, I'm taking it, and then I'm leading this full execution and rollout of it at the same time.
That narrative really came through in her nomination. She was I almost picked her too, but yeah. I also, the CX piece too stood out to me for her. I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing your person here, but the CX piece stood out to me because in the beginning, when we were thinking about how to build this program, we're thinking about what does GTM really mean? Someone on our team was like, well, does CS actually fall under GTM? Because they're already a customer, right? And I argued back that absolutely it does. You still have to go to your customer market, as it were. And so it all has to work with sales and marketing as well. So I think Chelsea certainly was a standout for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we've got Kevin Sundin. Gunn, this is your pick.
Yeah. So Kevin is a HubSpot consultant. He founded a company called Sly Orange, which is a HubSpot app that helps with multi-team activity management in HubSpot, which is very cool. I've had a chance to try it out. If you're thinking about team companies that have marketing and sales and CS all in HubSpot, and tracking who is doing what when, which teams are touching which contacts. If you have multiple teams working the same contacts, That can get really confusing, and he's come up with a really clever solution to that. But that was not the subject of his nomination. One of his clients, I think their name was Prophetic, had nominated him, which I thought was really cool. We actually saw across nominations, most of them did not come from themselves. We had the option where you could nominate yourselves, but so many of them were bosses and colleagues and clients. So I feel like you really have to make a client happy to get them to nominate you for an award. So for this company Prophetic that Kevin worked with, he built a foundation for RevOps from scratch in 2 months, which is crazy. And the thing that they called out is that it not only was like incredible speed to value, but it has scaled. So he didn't sacrifice the sustainability of those systems in order to do it quickly. And the foundation that he put together included lifecycle and pipeline automation. There was a founder-led outbound engine, and then alignment of data from sales, marketing, CS, and finance. So a lot of moving parts there. And I've had the opportunity to work with Kevin in the past, and the thing that always stood out to me about his solutions is that they're creative, but they're also easy to use. So he's got this extremely technical mind, but he's also got a lot of like empathy and human understanding that sometimes you don't see with really advanced technical users. So he's bringing the people skills to bridge the gap between all of these different teams in HubSpot and make all of their systems and data work together.
Nice. All right, I'm up next. I chose Jonathan Fianu. Something that stood out on his nomination, which, by the way, I believe it was either his staff or his coworkers, and that's part of why I picked him, is because of how admired he was and respected by his team. But one of the leading things was he built a learning management infrastructure for Thunes, and also I don't know Jonathan, so hi Jonathan. But I have some experience with learning management systems. I understand their complexity. I also understand, I used to have a training and enablement job for account-based marketing when I worked at Demand-Based many moons ago. I know how hard it is to train people, to get people locked in and bought in. So he built out this learning management infrastructure, but it drove efficiency and profitability. In his nomination, I think I read EBITDA like 4 or 5 times. And it was it's on the slide, $150 million in annual recurring revenue. So it sort of brought back this theme, which was also mentioned in his nomination, about alignment and activation, right? So going back to like, yes, he can activate, yes, he can execute and implement, but he can align. And it's so funny, Gunn, because you teed me up for this. You literally just said something about Kevin Sundin, about him being a bridge. On his nomination, it said, quote, "a builder and a bridge." I mean, chef's kiss. That's the hardest part. He's also super active in the RevOps community. He's a teacher. He understands that knowledge is power. He wants others to know what he knows, not what I mentioned earlier in the webinar, where you're hoarding knowledge and trying to keep it just for yourself. He's giving credit where it's due. He's sharing. He's leveling people up, and it seems like it's because he really cares. And one of the things that I sort of was left with when I was done looking at his nomination was, it seems like a guy I'd want to work for, or would want to work with at least. And I don't know if you guys follow Gary Vaynerchuk, but that's like one of his big like hiring criteria, or maybe it was Mark Zuckerberg. Now I'm misciting stuff. But if you want to work with somebody, it's probably a pretty good sign that they're a great leader. And a great connector of people. And connective tissue is a word that we use a lot at Aptitude 8, because I mean, that's all we do is help companies with RevOps and, big complex implementations. And to actually get it done right requires connective tissue across departments and even within your own team. And he really stood out to me. So thanks, Jonathan. All right. Now that we've spotlighted some folks, we've gone through some trends, let's sort of shift gears a bit and have an open discussion. about sort of what does GTM look like in the future? What does 2026 sort of hold? What skills, what systems are sort of shaping, and how can operators continue to grow their impact, both for their organization but for the greater community? All right, I think this slide builds. It does. Awesome. What do we think great looks like next year for GTM operators? I'm thinking AI, again, has to be embedded and has to be a part of it. What about y'all?
I'm going to go like the prequel to AI, which is clean data. I think you have to, you saw this if you attended Inbound this year. In 2024, Inbound was all about like big flashy AI announcements. And in 2025, it was all about data and data cleanliness and, how to make all of that stuff actionable for AI. So I think that's going to be, I think HubSpot probably had the realization we launched all of these AI tools, but nobody is actually able to use them because they have messy data in their portals. So I think the first step is cleaning up that data.
Yeah, we did a webinar a couple weeks ago, a month ago, where we actually walked through a couple of really great examples of things that operators built with AI. And that was actually what we started with. We were like, hey, look at this great stuff that can be built with AI. And then we spent the next 50 minutes talking about the hundreds of hours that they had to spend on fixing their data, putting the infrastructure in place to actually be able to execute on those things. And so to Ryan's point, I think we maybe spent the last, call it year, thinking, hey, this is like a shortcut, right? Like I'll do this AI stuff and then I'll like get these really great results. I think now we've realized that like everything in life, there are no shortcuts, and we need to have that solid foundation in place. And I think that's what great looks like next year is folks are going to realize that investing in that stuff that might be behind the scenes and kind of at the core level is what you got to do first. And then you're going to be able to realize all this value from all of these other things.
Yeah, I think the piece to me that fits into that, I agree with both of those, is more cross-functional work as well. I think the more we see AI, the more it's pulling that data that needs to be clean from lots of different systems and combining it and doing awesome things with lots of different types of data. So I think we're going to see more of general RevOps or go-to-market ops just as like a general function rather than so specifically in like marketing ops or sales ops, which by the way, like we work with sales and customer success teams, I've said, but we see so many marketing ops people that are like their title is marketing ops, but they're still doing sales and customer success ops and all of that. So I think we'll just see more of like a operations kind of generalist that has to know all of the different systems and work with all of them in order to implement any of these AI solutions.
I think
I'll co-sign on that and just add, I think and you brought this up in your with the nominee we spotlighted for you, Kim, where I think now people are actually we actually understand that, hey, like revenue operations, like revenue is what you generate from your customers. And previously when we were able to be in an economy where you could spend $2 to acquire $1 of revenue, it was fine to just focus entirely on sales and getting new people in the door. But now we actually understand, hey, like getting customers, keeping them around, making sure that they have a great onboarding experience, that we're able to expand them, that marketing knows how we can deliver, better customer marketing and product marketing to drive upsell and expansion revenue. Like all of those things I think are finally here. And the best operators are also going to understand that the CS piece can deliver huge amounts of value. And I think that'll be another big focus area next year too.
I would love to see more GTM ops leaders have either a seat at the executive table or be very, very close to the executive table. And I say that because it often feels like ops leaders are winning because there was some random, oh no, now this hurts, it broke, please go to this, right? A very reactive sort of application of their skill set. I'd love to see more GTM ops leaders actually sitting at that leadership table and doing the planning and discovery to sort of chart out the year. You see it with, sales leaders and marketing leaders, what's our Q1, Q2 plan? And I feel like a lot of ops folks are just sort of left cleaning up mess. And I'd love to just see them have a little bit more, power and authority at the table where the big decisions are made.
Yeah, I actually, sorry, Ryan. I'll let you go first and then I'll add in.
I was going to say, I definitely see that happening. And I think AI is going to accelerate that because I think the background that a lot of marketing and sales and CS leaders are going to have is especially in the case of marketing, it's not going to be the leaders that come from a creative background, because that's starting to kind of be almost commoditized by AI. The people who are doing it well it's not a commodity, but it's becoming easier to scale that type of thing. But ops is not that way. So leaders, I think it's going to be a prerequisite for leaders to have those ops skills. So maybe you don't have like a VP of RevOps at the leadership table, but all of your functional leaders have operational skills.
Yeah, I can definitely see like revenue operations leaders moving into CRO sort of roles, right? Where they'll be chief revenue officer. But I also see a lot of revenue operation leaders actually currently do or already have seats at the table, if you will. Like I was just this conversation was happening in our RevOps Co-op Slack group this week, where someone was like, "Hey, I'm a VP of RevOps at a $50 million B2B AI company. It's board reporting season. Building the deck is one of the most stressful parts of my job. Would someone be willing to like sit down and just like chat about like the best way to do it, how they've done it, what works, what doesn't work?" And like tons of people chimed in like, "Oh yeah, like here's what I do, here's what I don't do, here are the resources that I use to put this framework together." So conversations like that don't happen when people don't have the experience, right? So I think the best companies are understanding now, to your point, hey, this isn't a reactive thing where something breaks, let's put RevOps in. It's like, no, RevOps needs to be there. They're the ones that own the deck. They're the ones reporting out on this stuff. They're the ones making sure that we're driving in the right direction. So I'm seeing a lot of that happen already, which is great.
And across our client base, actually, Gunn, you just made me think of this. We're seeing more and more CMOs actually like sitting at the helm of a full digital transformation initiative. And it's because they've over time garnered these operations skills. Traditional marketers don't tend to be the most opsy. But what I'm seeing now is like almost like a divergence of I've seen chief brand officer and then chief marketing officer, where the chief marketing officer is actually doing more of the ops, and obviously brand is doing content and all of that. So I love to see that for marketers, because to your point, Gunn, it means that they're getting there because they actually have those ops skills, and they don't know that they'd be there if they didn't. I don't know how you'd be a super successful CMO if you don't have that background. All right, what else we got here? What trends are defining modern RevOps, MOps, SOPs? Ooh, anyone got any initial thoughts?
I think tech stack consolidation is going to be a big one. We've already talked about how all of these teams are kind of starting to come together under the same set of tools. I think a big driver of that is, in the old way of doing things, each team had their own tech stack and the data was so disjointed, but now by necessity, they need to talk to each other. And then the other side of that is the expense of just having such a broad technology stack. If you can do it in one tool, then you can save a lot of money. So I've definitely seen that happening in the market already, is that companies are downsizing their tech stacks to more of a platform play than a bunch of point solutions. I'm
trying to think of my opinion about that. I feel like my I do agree with that. Like theoretically, when I think about our own tech stack, like I agree, and I want everyone, I want to make the most of the tools that we already have and we're already paying for, right? And I also I am such a person that I want a tool that does the job that I need it to do. And so there's such a balance in there of kind of making one tool work for all the small things versus, again, kind of going back to what we said earlier, the ability to at least have the data connected. So I'm actually kind of in a place myself where I'm I would rather reach for a tool that I know is going to do the one singular job that I want it to do, but I know that I can sync data back, I can connect data from my CRM or wherever. All of these different data points can kind of connect together so that they're working together. So I think that's the mindset that I'm approaching it in, at least, is there are so many, and there are going to continue to be so many more smaller tools that are popping up that do one small thing really well, as long as they can talk to each other and as long as it doesn't feel completely disconnected from the rest of the processes. I think that's going to be a trend that we start seeing more too. I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting how it shakes out, because there's a tension between both that I want.
Yeah, I agree. It's about picking and choosing where you need the additional functionality that a point solution offers.
Yeah.
But Kim, probably you, in those examples where you were like, hey, I need a tool that I know does the exact thing that I wanted. I think the main thing is you probably still evaluated the current tech stack that you had first to see what they could do. And I think those are the trade-offs, right? Is a lot of people are like, okay, yeah, sequencing, right? Something I evaluated this a year or two ago, even on our end, where it's okay, can do that within the platform today. Is it 100% of the way that I would want it? No. Is it 70%? Yeah. Is that good enough? Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly.
But in some cases, you're going to say, no, actually, that is not good enough. I need something that's going to give me 100%. And I think that's the way that people are approaching that right now.
Sure.
I also think, totally separate, but I also think that there's going to be more ops folks leaning more into traditional coding or vibe coding.
Yeah.
I think we'll do more of that. I know we're getting close on time here, guys. Underrated skills. I go back
influencing.
to sorry, say that again, Matt.
Influencing, and actually, I would say this applies. Well, obviously, we'll use operators here. So a lot of times, operators are not right. They're not maybe the super extrovert, sort of people, kind of wanting to get the spotlight. Right. We mentioned how they do a lot of things behind the scenes, but I think this is especially true for every single role. At the end of the day, you've got to be a salesperson for yourself, your ideas, the things you want to do. And so recognizing that, you've got to be out selling the value that you're bringing every day, selling the ideas that you have, selling the directions that you want to take, selling the tool that you want to bring in, the new process that you want to roll out, right? That's super, super important. Those things you can't just take for granted as being able to speak for themselves. So I think that's one super critical skill for operators to get right.
It's funny you mentioned that. It's the next bullet.
There you go. I can predict the future.
I do think it's such a good point, and I think it's so easy to kind of sit back and be like, okay, that was really awesome what I just did, and I can't wait for someone to notice. And I've done that myself, where I'm someone's going to notice, and I'm going to get the biggest shout out here because this is going to be exciting. And then everyone else is dealing with their own stuff. Nobody is paying as much attention to your work and your job as you are. And so I think that's been the biggest learning for me over the past 3 or so years in my career is you have to be the one that advocates for yourself and shares what you're doing. And the more you share and be credible, obviously, but the more you share about the stuff that you're doing and share about how you are impacting other people's roles, how you're impacting other teams, how you helped other teams, the more people are going to want to listen and the more people are going to come to you and the more influence you're going to develop. But you have to be the one to do it, and you can't wait for someone to come and recognize you, even though that's great. And I was actually going to shout out the people who did nominate for themselves for this, because I think that's a piece of it is you're recognizing that you are doing the work and you're recognizing yourself. And I think that's actually really hard to do. And major props to the people who were able to do that for themselves. And I think that's the first step.
It's also not just internally too, it's
Yeah.
externally. And I don't want anybody to go quit their jobs, but if you're building a personal brand, it's certainly a way to get hired, right? And to get noticed, maybe for bigger and better opportunities.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we are running out of time here, but I'm excited to announce that next week we're building onto this GTM Leadership Awards motion, and we're actually going to be spotlighting winners and letting the winners tell their stories and letting our guests actually ask them questions and really dig into the nominations and what they built and how they built it and how did they gain influence and how did they nominate themselves or get their staffs to nominate them. So that'll be next Tuesday, the 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern. Mark your calendars. Please join us. And thank you so much for coming today. We appreciate your time and hope you learned.
Thanks.
All right, y'all. Bye.